Those of you who readily follow Voice of the Forge and Shooting Straight know that I generally only make a video when something is worth discussing. Today on Shooting Straight, I'm going to talk about Rotherham. So please bear with me. There are two main strands with this, and the first is that there once again is this theory that Islamophobia is a thing. Now, first of all, let's examine the word phobia. It means fear of something which is unjustifiable. It's an unreasonable fear. So you're scared of a spider that could be as small as a couple of millimetres across. That's a phobia because it can't really hurt you. However, Islam, which means submit or submission, and is then translated as peace, only because through submission to the doctrine of Islam means the whole world will be peaceful, because you've all agreed to follow the same text of barbarism, is a real fear. That isn't to say that we're afraid of the book, but rather the book's fan club. When people feel that beheading, that sex with underage girls, and rape, women being second-class citizens, you have to drape them in a tent because men can't control themselves if they see something sexy. These are all things to be feared. And if we do not fear the Islamist, the political and religious spread of Islam, then we will basically fall over and die like the Roman Empire when we are invaded from within and out, reproduced. That's number one. And today is going to be a quick video, but number two is Rotherham. Once again, we see that those people of Islamic bent being treated more favourably than those who actually are indigenous to this country. And not only is it the fact that we've had such a major scandal with the Rotherham child grooming gangs, and in the light of these alleged attacks on the Islam community increasing, it's the fact that these attacks have actually been falling. And that means that people are getting over the anger that they justifiably had when white girls are being targeted as being easy and being beneath the Islamist men, and the breaking of law. Now, one thing that stands to mind is that policing in the UK is policing by consent. All the powers and everything else that the police have are due to the fact that we agree as a citizenry to be policed in this way. And we could be facing a situation where, in the not too distant future, if these kind of things keep on going, then we might actually have a backlash against the rule of law in this country, because it isn't following the actual enforcement of the laws that we have. Now, I take quite a dim view on this, because there are many laws which are let go daily, and something as simple as people riding on the pavement may not actually be a major issue. But if you have gangs of people doing something and getting away with it, and then they do something else and getting away with it, you then lead to a situation where you may have a gang of thieves which ride on the pavement and then snatch goods. And this isn't a hypothetical, this actually did happen in London for a while. So if you actually crack down on one kind of crime, you can crack down on greater crimes, because people aren't going to progress. And where you have a situation where people of a certain faith or certain extraction get ignored on a daily basis, then you set the groundwork for things such as grooming gangs for sex with children, because they're not getting stopped for drugs, they're not getting stopped for buying alcohol for underage people, and gradually it escalates because they exist in a vacuum of lawlessness. Now, it is interesting to note that 200 police officers are now under investigation for corrupt practices. Let that sink in for a moment. 200. In the biggest police force in the country, the Metropolitan Police, there is between 27.5 and 30,000 for a major metropolitan area, and 200 would be a sizable and significant amount of police officers for the Met to deal with. Rotherham is much smaller, so therefore this 200 figure is much more significant. When we can't trust that figure within a police service, within a police force, then we have a major issue indeed. And it is a scandal that now we have to start looking at the leadership of such police forces and look at the way in which they are being run. How far up the chain does this corruption go? Are they asking us to believe that it is only the foot soldiers, the police officers on the beat, that are thus corrupt? Because if they are asking us to believe that, then what about the sergeants who run the teams? Surely not all of them turned a blind eye to the misdemeanours of their cohorts. Surely the inspectors who manage the sergeants, who manage the teams, weren't blind to some of the activities of some of their officers. And if we question the sergeants and the inspectors, we then have to start looking at chief inspectors. And once we start looking at the chief inspectors, we might as well go the whole hog and go all the way up to the Association of Chief Police Officers, ACPO. And if we start looking at ACPO, that means that we are looking at a rotten police force. We are looking at a root and branch corruption in one area of the country. And if we have it in one area of the country, do we have it in another? Is it fair to say that Tower Hamlets or places and suburbs in London haven't got a similar problem where there are large migrant families? Where else in the country have we got problems with mass immigration, non-integration, and therefore where has the rule of law been subverted by immigrants, whether they be first, second, third or fourth generation? At what point do we look at the country that we have and say, this is our country, this is our rule of law, and it applies to everyone equally? At what point, when we have such a massive scandal like this, and yet we are blinded by headlines about Operation Yewtree going after the likes of Glitter, Saville, Harris, and people that committed offensive 30 or 40, 50 years ago, when there are offences on our doorstep which are going unreported and unsolved every day now? Where do we draw the line, and where do we turn around to these people and say, you have our consent, but it is subject for that consent to be removed? This has been a thought piece by me, Voice of the Forge, shooting straight from the lip as always, and I hope that you can find something to discuss in what I've said. This is a shorter than usual piece. Thank you for listening.